Hi, welcome. First of all, it's such a pleasure having you all with us. This is our second program for 2025 of This is Who I Am, Writing a Strong Artist Statement. And in today's landscape, it's so important as you are seeking is knowing how to articulate who you are and what you do. Um, I can't see you. If you're able to turn on your video or raise your hand, who's new to our series, our program series, Gold Standard Arts Foundation?
This is my first time.
Nice. Okay, well, a couple of you. So I'm Bonnie Oda Homsey, and it's been a pleasure as chair of programming, contributing what I can to Gold Standard Arts Foundation's mission, which is really to champion our diverse Asian creative voices across multiple disciplines. So just a couple of things. You are already doing it, but if you would just keep yourself muted until you're speaking and do use the chat. I'm going to help fill out by monitoring the chat for questions. So I turn it over to Phil Chan.
Hi, friends. Nice to see you. Bonnie, can you just make sure I can share my screen? Um, if not, I can just be the host again. Hi, everybody. So nice to spend some time with you. I'm just got out of rehearsal with Ballet Hispanico, so I'm a little sweaty and sticky, so I'm glad there's no smell-o-vision tonight. We're here to figure out how to write a strong artist statement, and there's a few different barriers in the way. First of all, as Asian Americans, we have some specific needs around how do we communicate our work. Our identity is often a big part of our practice. And so our artist statements might look different from other groups, yet we have very few opportunities as Asian folks to focus on our unique challenges. So part of Gold Standard's mission is creating that space for Asian Americans to address topics like this in a more specialized lens just for our community. So while you could get a broad how to write an artist statement anywhere on the internet, you will not be able to get an artist statement about how to write a strong artist statement as an Asian American. So why don't we start there? If everybody has a pen and paper or maybe an email draft or some sort of place where you can start to write and take notes, because I really want this to be something that is interactive that you guys can also take away from this. So if everyone could just take a minute and grab something they could write with or a chat box, and away we go. So first of all, what is an artist statement? An artist statement is a written description of your work. It provides context to help connect audiences and supporters with your output. So basically, it's probably the first introduction for you. So for those of us working in dance, it can be pretty hard for people to get an idea of your choreography, since choreography is live with bodies, or often video, and words, the whole point that we're dancers, we don't have to be good with words, right? We can use our bodies. So this is the one time where we actually have to turn our creative practice into something written. So let's just get as a little warm-up exercise. We're going to take 3 minutes. I'll time you so you don't have to worry. A free write. So take 3 minutes to write an artist statement for an artist you admire. So it could be a performer, maybe someone George Balanchine, Martha Graham, someone like that. Or it could also be a painter or an artist. Kusama, Leonardo da Vinci, Igor Stravinsky, you name it, Etta James. So take 3 minutes, I'll set a timer now, and just write an artist statement for somebody you admire. So again, here I'm putting the prompt back on of what is an artist statement. So just take 3 minutes just to write what you can.
Tu veux du fromage?
Hey, friends. So just to come back to it, an artist statement, written description of our work. Does anybody want to share who they chose and what your artist statement would be for the artist you admire? And please don't be shy. We're all family here. Anyone? There's no wrong answers. We're all learning together.
Hello.
Hi.
I had a tough time deciding on someone, but
Okay.
I went with Taylor Swift.
Okay, Taylor Swift, great artist statement. So what is Taylor Swift's artist statement from your perspective? No wrong
From
answers.
okay. She's a young, beautiful, talented woman who cares about her family, friends, and fans. She has strong social values and is a great role model for young people.
Great, fabulous. Anybody else? We'll do two more before we move on. So if you want to move on, please volunteer. No wrong answers.
I wrote about a friend of mine,
Great.
Nick Graves, and I said Nick Graves is a performer and choreographer based in Chicago, Illinois. He often creates work exploring.
Oop, I think you cut out, Hannah.
Oh,
Oop, your connection is not great. I'm sorry, Hannah, I can't hear you. Is there anybody else who wants to go? Anyone else?
Okay, I'll go.
Yes.
I wrote about Shen Wei.
Okay.
Shen Wei is a Chinese American choreographer. He weaves Chinese opera movements and philosophy into his contemporary dance, creating dance works that blend Eastern and Western aesthetics. His works are often inspired by poems and paintings.
Great. Fabulous. So we have some very specifics there. So hallmarks of a strong artist statement clearly communicates your artistic vision, process, and purpose in a way that is engaging, specific, and authentic. All right. So what are some of these things? First of all, it's concise. So an artist statement is very clear. It doesn't use too much language. There's a great quote by George Balanchine that I love that it's a thing is not perfect until there's nothing more you can add, but when there's nothing more you can take away. So what is the most essential part about this? And you can even play a game where how can you say, how can I cut out some words? How can I write my artist statement with even fewer words? It's a writing challenge that forces you to be concise. Um, Another thing that's really great about a strong artist statement is an active and authentic voice. So really making sure that your syntax, your grammar is phrasing things in an active way as opposed to a passive way. Also highlight intentions and influence with specificity and depth. I love that example of Shen Wei. He's inspired by specific things, right? Chinese calligraphy, painting, visual arts, right? And so there's a way for us to get a sense, okay, who is this person and what inspires them? What are they drawing inspiration from? Another thing is emotional and intellectual impact. So a good artist statement makes you feel something, makes you think, makes you say, huh, that's an intellectually challenging statement, or that person is coming from an emotionally interesting place, right? So you have to hook the reader with either some sort of emotional or intellectual thought that gets them to be more curious about who you are as an artist and what drives you as an artist. Also connection to a big idea, right? So what are you inspired by that is larger than yourself? Are you an artist that's inspired by climate change, by social justice, by racial equity, by nature? So what is the larger thing that you are interested in connecting your work to for an audience? And then as you close your artist statement, something that gives a lasting impression, right? Like think of this as like you have a really lovely meal and you want to close with a nice dessert. So close in a way that lets people say, I remember this person. That person has something unique, something interesting, something specific. and I want to learn more about that person. Something in that artist statement gave me such a good teaser that I want to continue figuring out what that is. So here's an artist statement here that we can take a look at, just an example. I love dance and have been choreographing for a while now. My pieces are inspired by my emotions and personal experiences. I like to mix different styles together to create something unique. My goal is to make people feel something when they watch my work. I hope to keep growing as an artist and share my passion with others. So this, I would give an example. This example, I think, is kind of a weak artist statement, right? This artist statement could apply to me, but probably could apply to every single person on this call, right? So things about this is make this not as strong. It's vague, so there's not too much specificity here. So I love dance and have been choreographing for a while. What's a while? You know, my pieces are inspired by emotions and personal experiences. Well, like what? Is it moving to America at the age of 10? Is it having an abusive father? Is it I love skydiving, and so all my pieces are inspired by skydiving, right? So I like to mix different styles together. Well, what different styles? Is it ballet and modern? Is it classical Indian? Is it Butoh? Is it hip hop? Is it jazz? So, you know, not too specific here, right? There's also a lack of depth, right? My goal is to make someone feel something when they watch my work, right? Feel what? It sort of it says it on the face, the sort of surface value, but it doesn't really probe deeper. So there's a lack of depth, a lack of specificity there. There's also no clear identity. This choreographer could be from anywhere in the world, could be any age, could be inspired by anything. So I really don't walk away with knowing anything more about this choreographer than that they're a choreographer, right? That's all I can glean from this artist statement. So there is really no clear identity. There's also no impact. So I hope to keep growing as an artist and share my passion with others. What's the bigger impact here of this work? So again, it's sort of vague, like why are you a choreographer? What drives you? I like to think about this idea in many cultures of this magical thread. Sometimes it's a red thread in Chinese culture, sometimes it's a golden thread. But this idea that you have this destiny, you have this fate, you have this thing that is driving you to be an artist. What is that? What makes you get up in the morning and say, I could not possibly be an investment banker today? I definitely cannot go to law school. I could not be a chemist. I couldn't be a bus driver. I have to be an artist. What is that thread that pulls you to have to be an artist? So think about what that is for yourself, because that's going to really be helpful if you can identify that in crafting a good artist statement. Here's another artist statement. So my choreographic process is rooted in interdisciplinary movement vocabulary that deconstructs traditional paradigms of embodiment. Through a postmodern lens, I engage with somatic methodologies to interrogate the interplay between kinetic sequencing and spatial dynamics. My work exists at the intersection of structured improvisation and contemporary compositional frameworks, fostering an ephemeral dialogue between performer and audience. Right? So at first, that seems, wow, this is pretty impressive. This person really seems to have a pretty intellectual and nuanced choreographic process. But if you read between the lines, again, this could be anybody on this call. So we all use interdisciplinary movement vocabularies. We all try to deconstruct traditional paradigms. We all are living in the postmodern times, so we can't help but work in a postmodern lens. And we work with kinetic sequencing, which is it's a fancy way of saying choreography, right? So this artist statement, while it seems at first glance to be pretty impressive, it's overly complicated and actually feels a little pretentious. It lacks an emotional connection. I'm just tripping over the vocabulary and trying to understand what the choreographer is saying that I don't really get any sort of feeling. It leaves me empty. It also, yeah, exactly, doesn't evoke a sense of feeling of what the actual choreographer is like. So again, this doesn't tell me about your process. That doesn't tell me anything about who you are, what drives you, what that golden thread is. And so again, this is not a super strong artist statement. Okay, let's take a little free write. We're going to take 3 minutes. This is the first draft artist statement for yourself. Okay, so again, This doesn't have to be perfect. This is a workshop. So we're going to be creating something. So by the end of the workshop, you'll have something that is a little bit more fleshed out. So this is your personal time, 3 minutes to start to write an artist statement about yourself. All right. And I'll set the timer so you can just relax. So okay, friends, come on back. Was that hard?
Yes.
Yes. Anybody else?
Yes.
Yes. Why was that hard? Let's all share as a group. Why was that hard?
Hard to write about yourself. It's hard to talk about yourself.
Why is that? I mean, as Asians, it is hard to talk about ourselves, right? But like, why is it hard? What's hard about it?
difficult to be objective
Yeah.
and see yourself through other people's eyes.
Yes. Hannah wrote in the chat, thank you, Hannah. It's hard to feel like I'm being honest about my own work. Wow, that's deep. What does that mean?
Hopefully I'm not. Am
Oh,
I
we can hear
cutting
you.
out?
Yeah,
Oh,
you're great.
yes. Okay. Great. I was afraid. Um, I mean, I think what I've learned about my own writing is that objectivity is not necessarily, it's not really useful in something like an artist statement, since you're trying to communicate why you feel that your work is important. So how you feel is the important part. But I feel like we've been socialized that being positive about our own skills is like bragging rather than just like telling the truth that you can be good at things and you should say so. Um, and I think that's like what's hard is I'm like, oh, am I being excessively praising of my own work, or is this just like how I feel? Like, do I just think I'm good at this thing? I mean, the goal is for the person reading this to believe that I am good at this thing. So of course I should should say that. So I think it's hard to, yeah, like, or balance whether or not that's something I think I do effectively communicate versus that's something that I'm trying to effectively communicate, which is again super subjective.
Right.
So
Yeah, I
that's
think in your artist statement, trying is never a good word to use in an artist statement. So like I'm trying to get the audience to feel something, feels unsure. I'm not sure I want to give the grant to someone who's trying to make the audience feel something. Whereas if you can say definitively, um, yeah, my dances about family make people cry because I try to pour my own stories into it. That feels a lot more honest than, yeah, my choreography is really great and everyone. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's that I'm trying to make the audience feel some way. Say, this is what the audience walks away with. Declarative, it feels a lot more, there's a lot more confidence there. Anybody want to share something they got stuck on? Is there anything in your artist statement you're like, that wasn't, I don't know how to say this? Does anyone want to share a first draft? We're all family here. We're all shy. Okay, let's take a look at culturally specific artist statements. Okay, so we're starting to chew on our own artist statements. All right, but now let's actually look at the culturally specific ones. So as Asian Americans, what does that actually look like? Okay, so here's a sample uh, artist statement. So as a Chinese choreographer, my work is influenced by my cultural background. I try to incorporate elements of traditional Chinese dance into my choreography, but I also mix it with contemporary styles. My heritage is important to me, and I like to show that in my work. I hope that people can see the cultural influences and appreciate them. Um, how could this artist statement be strengthened?
I I think it's a little bit general. It could be any one of us.
It could be any one of us, right? So how could you turn this general artist statement into something that would sound more like you?
I think I would add something like specific topics that I would be interested in exploring through my dance. Like
So
what?
what sentence would you change? Maybe can you read one of the sentences and just, it doesn't have to be true. You can just say,
Okay.
yeah.
And my heritage is important to me, and because it shaped who I am. It shaped who I am as an artist. And within those Chinese heritage, I'm particularly interested in the Chinese poems or Chinese paintings that
Yeah.
really I feel really connected to those, and I express those through my dance.
So maybe something like my heritage is important to me, and a lot of my work draws from classical poetry and calligraphy, which has not only shaped my childhood and upbringing, but also my practice as a working choreographer today. Something like that. Like that feels
Yeah.
more specific, a little bit more meaty. right?
Yeah.
And not every Chinese choreographer is inspired by calligraphy and poetry, right? So that's might be something that's unique to you. Maybe I'm a Korean choreographer and I'm inspired by K-pop as opposed to classical works, right? So there's a lot of different, or I'm inspired by Peking opera and not so much painting. So getting into that specificity is good. Where's another place where we could strengthen this artist statement or make it more unique to anybody on this call?
Um, being more specific with what my cultural background is. So, like, my work is influenced, like, by having immigrant parents who were fleeing some sort of political unrest and being specific about that, like
Yep.
something that really would shape um, how you were raised.
Right. So everybody's work is influenced by their cultural background, right? So are we talking about, you know, polka bands in Munich? Or are we talking about Peking opera? Are we talking about classical Indian dance? Are we talking about refugee parents, right? So that's another place where we could have a little bit more specificity. Any other thoughts? How do we as Asian artists talk about, for those of us who have a background in something classical, how do we talk about how we are influenced by both classical vocabulary, but also innovation as a unique artist? How does that intersect in your practice? I'll give an example. I'm making a new piece for Ballet Hispanico right now, and I'm using Chinese water sleeves in the choreography. So it's a Latin dance company working with, classical Chinese dance. And so if I were writing an artist statement and this was, my vein of work, I would say I like to incorporate elements of traditional Chinese dance into my choreography, but I also like to mix it with other cultures so that we can create something new. So what would happen if we mixed Chinese dance with flamenco or with salsa or with the bossa nova? So, I would get into that sort of specific. So as opposed to just mixing it with contemporary styles, maybe be more, again, more specificity there. Let's take a look at this other artist statement. So as a Chinese choreographer, my work explores the intersection of tradition and modernity, weaving elements of classical Chinese dance, folk movement, and martial arts with contemporary American storytelling. I'm particularly drawn to the fluidity and storytelling inherent in Chinese aesthetics, using these qualities to reimagine cultural narratives in a modern context. My choreography examines themes of identity, migration, and generational memory, while aiming to create movement that resonates across cultures by using contemporary hip hop music. Through my work, I seek to honor my heritage while pushing the boundaries of its expression in the contemporary dance landscape. What do we like? What could be stronger? You don't have to find fault with everything. This might be a good example. Find something you like. We have something in the chat.
It looks pretty good to me.
Yeah, what looks good?
It's concise and tells the whole story about that person.
What does the whole story mean? Can you break down the whole story? What are the elements of the whole story that you're seeing here?
Well, they explain where their work comes from and and that it includes so many different things into it.
Yes. What else? Anyone else?
They're specific about what the themes are and like what the elements of the Chinese aesthetic that they're interested in. Um, yeah, like they're just specific, and instead of just themes of identity, like they do a little bit more specificity about that. Um, Although I don't love the way that sentence, the my choreography examines themes of identity, migration, and gender memory while aiming to create movement that resonates. It feels like a lot to put in one sentence, and it's a little bit hard to digest. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden we're talking about the music. Like, oh, I thought we were talking about themes in your creation.
Great. So what's the lesson here?
Don't try to pack it in too densely. It needs to be digestible.
Great. What else? Anyone else see something either you like or that you're challenged by?
I do like the last line because it makes me want to feel something about that.
Does it make you also wonder about your own, like it's a mirror to yourself too? Like, oh, this person is how am I doing this in my work?
Right.
Is there a question back to the sort of an implicit question back to the reader, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. So let's take a look at some of these things. So again, about culturally specific, and these are maybe just for Asian artists or artists who are not white, who are working outside of a Eurocentric or with Europe as the default or whiteness as the default, right? So number one, be specific about cultural influences. So an example of that is I draw from the circular fluidity of traditional Chinese calligraphy, translating its brushstrokes into continuous movement seamlessly across the stage, right? I like that because it shows circular fluidity. That's a very specific idea, right? And it conjures up images in your head. This sentence has a lot of inherent movement in it, brush strokes, calligraphy across the stage, right? It evokes movement, right? While being specific about cultural influences. Share how tradition and innovation can coexist in your practice, right? So my choreography deconstructs the symmetrical formations of Chinese opera movement, reshaping them through improvisation to explore themes of identity and hybridity, right? So how do you bring the tradition forward? What parts of tradition do you bring forward? And how does tradition and innovation coexist? How is it, because that sometimes feels like a paradox, right? The past and the present or the past and the future. How can those two things possibly go together? But they do in all of us as artists. That's sort of part of our practice. So how do we get people to see what sides of our past do we bring forward and how do we translate that past into something that makes sense for this moment? Use personal storytelling. And this is one that each of you individually is going to have to figure out how to bring your voice to this story. So growing up in a multi-generational Chinese household in America, I was caught between cultures. My work bridges this work to navigate the space between ancestral memory and modern American identity. So again, very clear. It tells you, it's like a mini bio right here of who you are and what drives you, what inspires you, what do you keep coming back to in your choreography? What is that resting place when you're trying to figure out, oh, I'm sort of stuck. I'm in a jam, or I don't know what to make next, or I don't know what movement to make, or what themes to make, or what story to tell next. What's your North Star? What do you keep coming back to from your own personal story that is always refreshing? There's always a wellspring of creativity. So it might be, my grandmother has this old songbook, and I keep going back to it. And every time I think about it, it inspires me to create new movement. And I use that to generate something. So use personal storytelling to help break down some of those barriers, especially if you might be of a different culture, a different background from the person who might be giving you the grant. Highlight cultural aesthetics and philosophies. So inspired by the Taoist concept of balance, my choreography embraces duality of strength and softness. So, how can you be specific again about what inspires you from your culture? And you can also use this as an example to educate people. So if you don't know anything about Taoism, you can say, by the way this is phrased, inspired by the Taoist concept of balance, my choreography embraced duality. So already, I don't know anything about Taoism, but if I do know something about balance, symmetry, right? So if I know that that's what inspires you, even though I might not know about your specific cultural background or inspiration, relate that concept to something that everybody can relate to. So everybody understands symmetry. Everybody understands, you know, strength and softness. But if you say specifically, this is rooted in something from my experience, in this case, you know, my Taoism, you know, maybe it's something I was raised with, that also helps kind of give you some specificity and give you also a chance to talk about your cultural influences without being, I don't know, without leaning on the jargon. Oh, well, I'm a Buddhist, so I'm inspired by Buddhism. Well, what specifically? So again, highlight some of these cultural aesthetics in a way that is specific, that brings people in, that invites a reader in who might not know about that, you know, that specific culture. And then this ties into addressing broader themes and impact. So by weaving together Chinese folklore into contemporary performance, I aim to challenge Western-dominated narratives in dance representation on the global stages. So what's the broader point? What's the point of your work? Why would someone book you? What do you want someone to walk away from your show feeling or thinking about? What is the broader impact? How is your work received in a universal way? So how can anybody, any audience member, leave your show and feel something? What is it you want them to feel, right? So this combination of things is sort of that extra step that Asian folks, non-white folks have to think about when we talk specifically about incorporating our cultural background into an artist statement. So again, to summarize that, it provides context. Culturally specific artist statements use clear language. It explains that personal connection, and it relates to universal themes. So I'm going to keep this slide up as we keep tweaking our own artist statements. We're going to look at this other example here. So as an Indian classical dancer, my work is deeply rooted. It's one of the oldest traditions. Intricate footwork, expressive hand gestures, storytelling through dance. Right? So what do we see in this artist statement? What do we like? What do we not like? Does this check our boxes? I feel like you guys think I'm trying to catch you on a trick question. This is not a trick question. Just what do you like? What do you not like? None of these are perfect. So this is the chance for you to read something else and say, okay, how would this look like if I did it this way? What do I like in this artist statement, and what's my version look like?
I like that it gives us a lot of context, but it also connects the historical context to the artist itself. Like for me, this dance form does XYZ.
Yeah.
And it just very clearly ties this traditional form to their form, how it's similar and how it's different from a personal perspective.
Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in from a funders and grant panelist perspective. You know, one of the things that Phil mentioned earlier is the word concise. And when you are reviewing hundreds of applications, it's really important in the artist statement that you put up as concisely the most relevant, important, pertinent information, including a way to give a kind of visualization through language of who it is and what you do. So there's a lot of good stuff that's in here. I think that if I were to come in as a consultant and help them rewrite it, I would condense it to about 4 sentences.
That was my thought. It's way too wordy.
Yep, great. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to move on to some forbidden words. So with the current political climate, there are words that might automatically get your grant application tossed into the trash. And I have a list here. I'm happy to email it out to everybody on this list. There are some very interesting things if you look at what words are on this list and what words are not on this list. So these are words that are currently disqualifying for federal funding, right? And the way they do that is they will put your grant through like ChatGPT, and if you use any of these words, they'll just assume it's garbage, right? So, for example, I think it's very interesting that they have the word black there as a word, capital B black, that you cannot use, but Asian is not a word there, right? So that's I just think that's a very specific. We have LGBT, LGBTQ, but again, not necessarily Asian American. So does that mean we fly under the radar? If we use Asian American, I think we're probably safe, but what does that say about other groups that are not allowed to even say their own, the socially accepted name of what their background is? So again, um, what does that say about us as Asians and our proximity to white supremacy when we're allowed to use our own words and other groups are not? Just very interesting set of words here. But I'll email this out to folks. One way that you can check your own artist statement or your grants is actually you can put it in through a chat GPT, or you can search for these words. So you put your grant in, you'd say, can you highlight anytime one of these words appears? And it can do that for you. So that might be one sort of final check, just to make sure that your grant isn't thrown out. I don't think this is it's not right. This is not how we should be doing funding in the United States. This is just our current political reality. So if we want to get those dollars, we just have to get better at playing in the game. And if this is one of the rules, we will jump through that hurdle, unfortunately. So we're going to go back and let's go back to that first draft of the artist statement. I'm going to give you guys a little bit more time to rework this. And then let's come back together as a group. I'm going to put up this slide of hallmarks of a strong artist statement. I'll set a timer if you want to go back to your artist statement now that we've read a couple of them. Feel free to figure that out. Remember, feel free to come back to this list and just double check as you're writing. Is my artist statement concise? Am I using an active voice? Where's the specificity and depth? Is there an emotional or intellectual impact? What is the bigger idea? And if anyone wants to be brave and is using a computer to write their artist statement, wants to drop it in the chat, you might inspire other people, and it might be a place for us all to learn from each other. So I'd love to see other people's artist statements so mine can be better. And the price for that is I'm willing to share my artist statement with all of you. So if you want to drop your artist statement in the draft, your draft of an artist statement in the chat, it's okay. We're still workshopping these. These don't have to be perfect. It's not a contest. Works in process. So if anyone wants to drop their artist statement in the chat, and we can just take a look, see what we came up with. All right, friends, anybody want to share? Anyone? Was this helpful? Are you guys still writing?
Yeah, I'm still writing.
Still writing. Okay, I'll give you another second. All right, great. Still writing. Okay, we'll do one more minute. And remember, this is just a work in progress. You can keep working on this tonight for the rest of your creative career. Totally fine. This is just a first draft. about 1 more minute. Hey friends, here's the workshop portion that this is where you're going to get your money's worth. So we want to be able to give you feedback about your artist statement. So if you don't share with us, we can't give you feedback. And this, what's lovely about it is you not only have someone like Bonnie on the call, someone like me on the call, but also all of these other peers. We can also tell you, and yeah, it's a little hard being vulnerable and sharing your work and maybe getting feedback, but this is how we get better. We want you to have the best artist statement. Everybody in this room wants you to have the strongest artist statement you can get. So feel free to drop it in the chat, or if you'd like to read it out loud, we will take it either way. Let's help you get a stronger artist statement. Any brave little toasters? It doesn't have to be finished. You can just have what you have so far. Okay, we have one. Do you want to read it to us?
Okay, sure. Um, Here's my statement. Born and raised in China, Jimmy is a Chinese American dance artist and choreographer based in Queens. As an immigrant, he desires to seek a sense of belonging between two worlds through creating dance works that blend Chinese cultural elements and often untold immigrant stories and contemporary dance movement innovation. He is particularly interested in exploring the significance of food in Chinese culture through movement expressions. Through sharing his works, he hopes to challenge the Western-dominated narrative in dance and inspire more people to create and bring diverse voices to the global stage.
Great. Solid first draft. I like that it gives me a picture of who you are and where you're from right off the bat. I like that you lean into the fact that being an immigrant is a very important part of your practice and like a theme in a lot of your work. I love untold immigrant stories. As a reader, I'm wondering what is an untold immigrant story? Because it's untold, so that means I don't know what it is, right? So I want to know, what is your untold immigrant story? Um, I also love the specificity of food. That's such a specific thing and also kind of a curveball. Not many choreographers are inspired by food, right? So to be able to just get that in there, you already have my attention right away. Um, there are some parts that we could make this a little bit tighter. So maybe in this first paragraph, you were born and raised in China, and you're a Chinese American dance artist, and living in Queens. So we already know you're an immigrant based on that information. So is there a way to maybe tighten up some of that stuff? Also, this last sentence is it's very broad. I like that it leaves you with a good question, but it's very broad. So maybe is there a way you can talk about how, through sharing his works, he challenges the Western dominated, so he just not hopes to, but he challenges, make it stronger, challenge the Western dominated narrative in dance. How? Give me that how, and that's how to close your artist statement, and that'll be quite strong. Bonnie, do you have some feedback here?
Hey, congratulations, Jermaine. So I've got two different thoughts that actually maybe we can all absorb. It's really important to do your research initially and understand what the grant is and what it prefers to fund. So, in other words, if this was a project-based grant, I would push up the fact that you're using food as a really unique aspect to your work. And I'm thinking, Cloudgate toured this incredible work called Rice, R-I-C-E, some years ago. It was a full-length work, just gorgeous. So this is a unique element. If it was the kind of grant that was really about the artist's, I don't know, creative arc, then I think that those things about generationally who you are and what you are is important. So again, I'm just suggesting that you really do research, all of you, about the grant that you're looking at in order to tailor all of these things that Phil has shared with you about writing an artist statement.
Thank you, Bonnie. And you bring up a very good point. You might have multiple artist statements. So you might have an artist statement that is 2 sentences long. You might have an artist statement that you use for some grants. You might have an artist statement that is on your website. So there you might have slightly different variations on a theme. It's all still you, right? It's still all your words, your story. But you might tailor it a little bit based on the audience, based on the grant. So just don't always assume that the artist statement is set in stone. You might surprise yourself. If you put your artist statement on your website, a year later, you might go back to that same artist statement and go, I don't even know who that choreographer is. I'm completely changed as an artist. That those things don't even inspire me anymore. And so, but you might say, oh, but some elements of this statement do. So you might have to realign. So just keep this in mind that an artist statement is organic and changes with time as you change and grow as an artist. So keep going back to it, keep questioning. There still will be themes that are true North Star themes, right? That you'll always have questions about these themes, but just be open to different artists' statements. Anybody else want to share? Thank you for sharing.
Of course. Thank you for the suggestions.
Any other brave little toasters?
I think mine is different in that it's not a grant for me, it's a grant for an organization.
Great,
And
let's hear it.
I'm just a small part of that organization, and this is supposed to be what I bring to it.
Okay, let's hear it.
I've written I'm a retired gallery owner whose interest and abilities have evolved throughout my travels. My creative journey started in New Zealand with papermaking and bookbinding. Starting as a personal pursuit in my midlife, it eventually turned into a business and went from New Zealand to Mexico, then to Canada, and then to becoming a gallery owner.
So
It's almost more of a resume type thing than than an artist statement.
So maybe you could you mentioned paper making. So you're getting me. I'm wondering as an audience member, does this gallery specialize in paper? What about the gallery? Like what are you bringing from your story to the gallery? Is it the multiculturalism? It sounds like you've lived in lots of places. So does this gallery showcase a diverse global cultural art from all over the world, and that's why you are uniquely situated because of your experience to curate or to represent um, a lot of different artists from all over the world. So what is that? I think you can still share your story. There's a little bit of biography, of course, woven
Right.
into the artist statement, but the question is, how does that tie into the actual organization that you're serving? So I would clarify some of those. Is it a paper gallery? And if not, why mention your paper making? Say, I started as a paper maker, and through that process, I learned blah, 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 which is what this gallery is based on. So even if the gallery doesn't specialize in paper making, you can still say my journey as an artist through paper making taught me about X, Y, and Z, which I brought into my next phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I need to add a lot more words.
You need to add a lot more words and then cut a lot more words.
Right.
And
Yes.
one tool, and I guess we're here in the 21st century, so we might as well do this. AI is actually a pretty good tool for some revisions. So if you write a long artist statement and it feels like it's a lot of stuff, and you can put it in like ChatGPT and say, hey, can you condense this down to 50 words or a paragraph or 2 sentences? So I personally like to edit my things the old-fashioned way, but if you're not an editor, if you don't feel confident about that and you want to maybe have some suggestions, stick it in ChatGPT and see what pops out, and then maybe edit that version so at least you're in the right ballpark and say, oh, well, it missed this one thing that I actually think is important, so I'm going to put it back in. But it confused the other thing, which doesn't make any sense, so I'm going to take that out. So you still have to have a human eye to it, but this is just using it as a tool of a way to edit or condense. It can be helpful. Bonnie, do you have something to share?
Yeah, Mary, one tip that I would give you is think about the artist statement is what is not included in your resume or CV. And allow the words to paint a picture, just like the gallery is part and extension of your soul, your heart, your purpose. And so use words to give a sense of what it is that's in your gallery. And I think that that will help, in fact, create a kind of artist statement that is uniquely you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to be brave, but before I do that, um, I I'm going to send it and I'm also going to read it, but there's like a pretty big disconnect between the sections, and I'm not sure how I want to blend that. I haven't spent a lot of time acknowledging my Chinese Americanness in my artist work, and so I think I'm kind of working through that. So I just wanted to like say that,
Yeah.
preface this with that fact. I've done a lot more thinking about my work, like separated from that. I'm trying to unlearn that. Um, but here is Hannah is a Chinese American movement artist and the youngest child of 2 immigrants. Growing up in the US and the consequent Americanization of herself has given her a complex relationship to her heritage, which manifests in the searching nature of Huang's artistic work. And then, yeah, I'm gonna somehow tie things together, but this is more of the thematic stuff that I've been exploring as an artist. So, um, tenderness and care are increasingly important as the world pushes us to become less compassionate, and Huang's work explores these themes of emotional vulnerability in the face of others. Coming from a varied background of ballet, contemporary dance, and acrobatics, choreography balances controlled lines with sweeping physicality and abandon. And moving with abandon, I think. She creates work to inspire her audience to consider their own interpersonal relationships and the way they influence the world around them to be a kinder, softer place.
Great. I love this. I love that it paints a clear picture of where you come from. And right away in that first paragraph, I like the searching nature of your work. So again, it says that you are not just somebody who's likes making pretty things. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Some choreographers just want to make something pretty, and they can put that in my artist statement. Like I choreograph Broadway shows, and my goal is to make people laugh and feel good. And so it might not be any much deeper than that, and there's a place for that, and that's also okay. But the searching nature, it feels like there's something missing in you, and you're using your art to try and find that or to try and fill that void. And so I like that there's lingering questions in the air. Yeah, tenderness and care. What does that what does that look like? Is it tenderness and care between the dancers and the bodies? Because it looks like you're saying that there's controlled lines, there's sweeping physicality and abandon. So sweeping physicality and abandon, how does that relate to tenderness and care? Because when I think of acrobatics, contemporary sweeping physicality, I think of like people throwing themselves in the air at each other, and it could be even violent or aggressive. And so to have tenderness and care and softness as something you value, but also abandon.
Yeah, I think yeah, something about because tenderness and care and yes, movement quality, softness, but also this idea that like there's a counterpoint, right, with being open and that openness and vulnerability is not always soft and polished, and is often messier, more chaotic, um, less shaped. Um, but it feels really hard to pare that down, right? Into something that isn't so wordy. And of course it's movement, right? So movement into words is always hard.
So is this something where, as an audience member, I might see something very physical, very aggressive, but the takeaway I get is emotional softness. At the end of the night, I leave think so I might see a very violent piece, very aggressive physical piece, but at the end of the night, I want to just call my mother and connect with her and say, wow, I really owe my mother a phone call. You know,
Yeah,
is
yes,
is
like the
that
work, yeah, encompasses a wide range of qualitative movement, I guess. Like my work often it it has both, like section wise. Things to think about, I suppose. I think it's a good
oh yeah.
reminder that it was really helpful of like customizing, because I often am like, oh, my artist statement has to cover every kind of work I've ever created ever, and that's impossible. Um, so
But I think that what it does do, that first question of the searching nature of your work, that also is that's a golden thread for you, right? That's something in every work. So you can
mhm,
include you definitely should include some of those things. So, you know, for example, for me, one of the big um, challenges in my work is I like taking old European things that might be a little problematic and making them work for a 21st century audience.
mhm,
And like, you know, whether I'm directing an opera or, you know, staging a ballet, those are things that are drawn to me. And then from there, a question I ask myself in this process is I ask, what else could it be? So yes, you know, Madame Butterfly is a little bit racist, but what else could it be? How can I turn this music also into another meaning? So again, um, there is this larger theme in a lot of my works that I do, and so I lay that out, and then the specificity of the question. Okay, where does that universal theme in my work come from? That's the specific area. So I think if you compare those two things together, that would be that's where your sweet spot can.
mhm. Yeah.
Any feedback? We can also give each other feedback. Does anyone want to share thoughts, or did Hannah's artist statement bring out a question in yours, or give you a question, want you to give you impetus to revise a part of your artist statement? I think we might have time for one more example, or one more brave little toaster.
I guess I do have a question.
Yeah.
Similarly to Hannah, I'm struggling also with putting my Asianness, I suppose, into an artist statement. Like, I kind of feel like my work doesn't necessarily reflect anything particularly Asian. And I don't know if it's like relevant to put that in there. I kind of feel like I'm shoehorning like my culture in. Like, I'll tell you a story. I actually had a painting, so I'm a painter, and I had a painting teacher who told me I should do that because for like, I don't know, diversity reasons, or it might like mm, be a positive influence in a grant application or something like that. But I'm just not sure how to do that, if I should do that, if it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like,
I think what's lovely is because we're Asian American, we actually can have two artist statements. So you
mhm,
might have an artist statement that is about you as a painter. You might have an artist statement that is about you as an American painter. You might have an artist statement that is about you as a Chinese American painter. You might have an artist statement that is about you as a female painter, right? And they all could be completely different artist statements. Um, so again, and you might choose to use one artist statement over the other. I think this is the larger question you bring up is like, well, when am I just a choreographer and not an Asian choreographer?
That's rude.
mhm, yeah.
You know what I
I'm
mean?
not the only one.
What?
I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I find that.
Hey,
The only
folks, if
two
you're
people.
not talking, can you please mute yourself? Thanks, friends. So again, this idea of this idea of, okay, how can I be both universal and also share something specific? So if you were a painter, you might not want certain doors open if you say Asian, and other doors might close if you say Asian, right? And so then you have an artist statement that you can use both.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I also like, I'm also challenged by this idea that like I was staging a version of La Bayadere at Indiana University, and I asked the students like, well, is this Chinese American art? Like, are you dancing? Are you doing Chinese American art? And the answer is yes, because I'm a Chinese American. This is my creative output. So you're dancing in a Chinese American work because I'm a Chinese American choreographer, even though the ballet was, you know, a long time ago. But the way I'm doing it now, you're in my production, so you're working in a byproduct of Chinese American art. So I don't know if I can separate my Chineseness from my output, even if the theme isn't necessarily Chinese. Like, I'm just because I'm not using fans and dragons doesn't mean my work isn't Chinese or Chinese American.
Mm-hmm.
Bonnie, do you have something to share on that?
Yeah. Laura, thank you for raising that. Growing up a third generation in Hawaii, I never really considered the Asianness of myself until I moved to New York. And all of a sudden, in my first ballet class at ABT with Madame Peryaslavic, I was the only Asian in the room. And I felt for the very first time my Asianness. And I just share that with you because it's just interesting. Just because we are who we are doesn't mean that we need to shoehorn ourselves into a box either. What I'm really taking away from what Phil has shared today is that each of you is distinctly who you are. And what it is that you do is not just one thing. We are a myriad of things and impulses and needs and creativity. And so what he's giving us is really the outline, depending on the circumstance, to make a statement. If at this point, Laura, it's not about, who you are that's impacting your work, but it may be at some point that a project comes along with collaborators that just happen to be AAPI, that generates this kind of desire and passion to bring forth something specifically about that experience. So just, think about that. We're just not trying to, put you into a box, like opening you up to different possibilities.
I'll add one more example to that. I'm working on my second opera for Boston Lyric Opera. The first one was Madame Butterfly. I worked with an AAPI team. It was definitely an Asian American project. The next opera I'm working for them is La Traviata, and I'm setting it in a gay sort of scenario. So again, it's a queer project. I might not have any other Asians on the project with me, but I am going to have a lot of queer people. So my artist statement for Butterfly, if you read that, you would say, "Oh, he's so Asian. He's like working on all these Asian things." There's nothing Asian about the next opera I'm doing, but that also shows you that, or not inherently Asian, I should say, about this work. So I might use a slightly different artist statement if I was promoting Traviata than if I'm doing Butterfly, right? If I'm doing press, if I'm applying for grants for Butterfly, and the point is, it's an Asian project. I am going to lean into the Asianness, but for Traviata, I'm not. I'm going to lean into my queerness as as part of the statement of my place of authority for making the work this way. So again, um, I can take out the Asianness when it suits me. Um, but as an artist, I know that I can't help being Chinese in my work. Like anytime a work has a character with a father in it, I'm going to make that work differently because I have this long Chinese heritage of, respecting the father, this idea, this Confucius idea of the father that maybe Ratmansky just doesn't. Justin Peck just doesn't, or different. I mean, that doesn't mean they don't love their father, but they don't have that same weight that I do. So I might approach a father character differently in my storytelling. And that's okay, even if it's not an Asian story. The way I treat the father in Traviata, even though it's not set in Asia, I'm going to have a different perspective. So it's okay to have that Asianness. And I think another thing we also feel is especially as Asian Americans, well, I don't feel like I can claim that Asianness. I might be third generation. I might have I've never been to Asia. So how am I able to claim Chinese heritage or claim um, something from India that is part of my heritage, but not necessarily part of my growing up and tradition? Um, that's another challenge I think we face as Asian Americans.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's yeah, maybe having separate artist statements is makes sense just for different projects. And yeah, it's a lot to think about. I
Yeah, and it
yeah.
can keep changing.
Um, could I weigh in just because I feel like this is something that I've really struggled with as well, and I'm still
Yes.
kind of going through. And it's just this reminder that just because it doesn't feel actively relevant to your work right now doesn't mean that it's not still affecting your work. It's just not affecting it in the way that especially as like, not not first gen, like that you perceive as like Asian enough. I think that's something that I struggled with a lot. And it's just that because of who you are, like there's an inherent influence in the work because of like the way that you grew up, the way that you were socialized, the way, all these things that you don't realize were related to like who you are culturally, like they are there. And so I think like remembering that it doesn't have to be like a conscious part of your work, like specifically like in my artist statement, like my cultural background doesn't really impact the way that my art, at least right now, looks visually. Like I don't, I didn't have any training in any like classical Chinese dance forms, and so that doesn't come out in my movement creation, but like it comes out in how I express a theme because of how my parents raised me or something like that, right? Like where you can travel along more steps to connect your cultural background to your work if it feels like something like if that is relevant to an artist statement, like it can be a little bit more subtle, and that's still super Asian. It's real.
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's obviously, gonna show itself through just because that is, my life and the way I was raised, and those things come out really subtly in different ways. I guess I was also just struggling, like, is that something I should even put into it? Is it worth it? Like, is that a normal thing to do in an artist statement to say like what your racial background is, like, or does that just depend on the project or the grant or whatever?
I think it really can depend. And also how you feel. If this is a big part of your work, go for it. Like I use a lot of um, Chinese influence in my work, even in ballet choreography. So I'm going to include that in my artist statement because if you're booking me, that's what you're going to get. Um, so for me, it's something I would put, but not every artist would, and that's okay. That's also okay. Um, Yeah, I think we're sort of getting close to time, so I just wanted to thank all of you for being in community. And again, what I love specifically about doing this work with Gold Standard is the fact that we can also talk to each other. So like asking, like, I don't know if I feel if I feel Asian enough. Yeah, you're in a room with other people, and we've all questioned if we feel Asian enough, right? So that there's that shared space that we can actually make space to be with each other in community and um, ask some of these questions without having to explain. Everybody on this call knows what being Asian enough means, right? But in a mixed group, that might not make sense to some of the room. So that's one of the reasons that I think we really need this continued share space of learning. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm going to hand the floor over to Bonnie, who's our wonderful programming chair, and who can talk about our next program that's coming up, which hopefully will be just as interesting and helpful as this one.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us, and how wonderful that Phil has given us something to add to our artistic toolbox. So our next session is actually with our guest, Achinta McDaniel, who's the artistic director of Blue 13 Dance Company. So it's an opportunity for you to see how she's used her artistic statement to create a bigger tent of revenue for herself, across concert dance, commercial bookings, as well as teaching. She's on an adjunct faculty at USC Kaufman School of Dance. So that's Tuesday, May 13th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we really look forward to having you join us for more sessions. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, friends. And please do stay in touch. If you aren't a member already of Gold Standard, just go to our website, join as a member. It's $25 a year. It's basically like NPR, and it helps us send a strong signal to larger funders to say, hey, we have this community of Asian artists. Please give us money so that we can support you. More. And also, if there's anything that you need from an organization like ours, if there's topics that you want us to cover, if there's a need in the community that we can help address, please don't be strangers. Email us, tell your friends about us, and we can only do this together. The next couple years, I think, are going to be interesting, and the way we're going to get through it is together as a group. So the more of these moments where we can put down our phones and be together in community, I think will be what we need as the balm for the future. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Bonnie. And we'll see you on May 13th. Thanks, friends. Good night.